In 2019, I was privileged to give an award to a person in Europe who has stood up for Israel and the Jewish people in an extraordinary way. And the award was this painting of Moses coming down from the mountain with the tablets, made by the Norwegian artist Reidar Kolbrekk. And the first recipient was the Israeli ambassador to Norway and Iceland, His Excellency Ambassador Alon Roth. Today, I'm meeting him for an interview here in the Embassy of Israel in Oslo. Don't go away. Your Excellency Alon Roth, what a privilege and honor for us to come here to your embassy and to meet you. Thank you for receiving us.
Thank you very much for coming here, and I will take this Corona artifact and put it for a second on my lap while we can talk. But thank you again for coming here and talking to us.
Thank you. Now, sir, you mentioned the Corona crisis, the pandemic. This has hit Israel also very hard, I can imagine.
Yeah, it hits, I guess, everyone, all the countries alike. I think that what we see here in Norway is almost the same picture that we see in Israel. In some areas in Israel, it's even more severe. We had a very tough lockdown for several days, especially in several communities in Israel. But I do hope that there is a reason for optimism even today, you know, looking forward worriedly, but trying to come back to normal, if it's possible at all.
Exactly. Now, it must have hit Israeli economy very hard. I mean, this has been Passover, a very heavy touristic season, which is pretty much lost.
Exactly. You are very right. The touristic season is lost. I hear that countries are calling their citizens, you know, to have internal tourism instead of external tourism. And for a country like Israel that hosts millions of pilgrims and tourists alike, especially now when spring is so beautiful and calling, as you say, Easter and other occasions to come to Jerusalem and to other places in Israel, Tel Aviv alike. This is problematic, but I think that like every other country in other sectors of trade and commerce and industry, everyone struggles. And I think that Israel is just a mirror of what is happening here in Norway and elsewhere as well.
Exactly. Now, would you say that the resilience of the Israeli people in general has been a help in this time?
That's a very interesting question, because it's true that, you know, life in Israel can be very tough, sometimes in the north, sometimes in the south. But I would say that the Corona crisis came with a very, very demanding challenges to Israel as well that we didn't see in the past. So yes, Israelis are resilient. Israelis are known to have tough lives every time, but Israelis are known to have lots of questions. And lots of requests, and they question almost every order and every request that is being given. So, you know, in a way, we have very interesting times for the Israeli society. Toughness from one side, but lots of questions from the other side. Again, similar to some other societies in the world.
But just think of the immense creativity and innovation of Israel. I'm looking at this beautiful roll-up here, and I mean, your nation creates so many positive things for the world, and even now during the Corona crisis, your scientists are involved in finding solutions for the world.
Exactly. I think you're touching the heart of the issue. Innovation in Israel. You know, everyone in the world today, there are, I guess, dozens or hundreds of entities that are trying to defeat the Corona, whether today or the future Corona challenges. But I think that in Israel, and when you see the list of dozens and dozens of innovations in Israel related to Corona, who are not just, a vaccine or a treatment, but beyond that, it is really interesting, like in some other countries, but mainly in Israel, we see industries that traditionally were dealing with other issues have transformed themselves in matter of days.
Yeah.
In order to try and find very interesting solutions to the corona that were criticized sometimes by some other countries that took the idea and initiated it themselves few days or weeks later, like software and other issues. So yeah, we did it in Israel quite quickly, sometimes successfully, sometimes less, as always in innovation, but innovation was a great part of trying to deal with this crisis.
And it could very well be that Israel will come up with a decisive vaccine for the corona virus.
I will be international now by saying I hope that someone will find the vaccine. If it's going to be Israel, I'm going to be happy twice.
Yes.
But yes, in Israel, some companies are working very hard on it, again, like in other places in the world, in Europe, in the United States, in Asia. But in Israel, we have some Israeli companies that are very promising in these realms of the vaccine itself. But then it's going to take time as well.
Exactly. Now, I have checked and you're 59 years old, but when you were a pretty young guy, you were a backpacker in Norway. How old were you then?
Ooh, I was 22 years old. And I came to Norway, to Scandinavia and to Norway. I began in Finland, I continued in Norway, in order to be far away in a distant land that doesn't look like Israel.
Yeah.
At the time, it was not very often that you took an airplane in order to travel somewhere. And to go outside and to come to Norway, it was for me a very, very, I would say, deep emotional thing. And yeah, I fell in love in this country, and I'm very privileged to be the Israeli ambassador here after so many years.
This must have been in the mid-80s.
It was in the beginning of the 80s, yes, 83, 84.
Yes. What impressed you by Norway as a backpacker?
Oh, I was very much impressed by the people. We are different cultures, North European, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern cultures. We are different, and I was very much impressed by the difference. I liked very much the humbleness. I liked very much the way Norwegians think and talk, especially in the rural areas. I went up to Honningsvåg and Nordkapp.
Wow.
And I did all the way from the east and then came back from the west as a backpacker.
Wow.
And it was very interesting. I was very much impressed by the people, to say the truth.
Now, I met you several times, sir, but I met you at the Holmenkollen Ski Museum at an event that the Kazakhstan embassy put on with the Holmenkollen Museum. And you were wearing your ordinary clothes like everyone else. And it was so fun to watch your keen interest in seeing these skiing achievements of Kazakhstan and Norway. Did you like our sports?
I love your sports. I'm skiing every winter, at least 10 times here in Norway. Unfortunately, today impossible, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm still measuring every weekend the height of the snow everywhere through the applications you have in the phones. I love very much your sports. I think that your sports are a bit different than ours, but in a way look alike. I'll give you an example. You like to sail as well, a lot here in Norway.
Yes,
I love
of
it
course.
as well. We sail a lot in Israel. We even had some gold medals, Olympic gold medals in sailing, etc. We travel in the desert. And when you compare traveling in the desert and being in the desert, as not just as traveling, but as a feeling, as a kind of, wow, me and the nature, when I'm skiing here, when I see this immense landscape covered with snow, it reminds me of our deserts and the way I travel there back as a backpacker, even nowadays.
Huh.
So I love very much the way you Norwegians interact with your nature. And for me, it's a blessing because I love it. So I don't just admire, but I participate in it as well.
At that specific event at Holmenkollen, the Kazakhstani Olympic champion Vladimir Smirnov was there, and Norwegian Vegard Ulvang and the skater Sten Stensen. So are those names that you know also?
No, I didn't know them. I was very privileged to know these people, to have a very short chat with them. And I'm a huge admirer of the Norwegian sportsmen that are really competing almost in, well, not just competing, winning almost every winter sport on earth. And I know how much dedication and how much work should be given there and should be invested there. So yeah, for me, being there and seeing a former Norwegian sportsman, of course, with this, with the other part coming from far away, was very, very moving and very interesting for me.
You know, my wife Aina, she's a great cook, and she says so many times that people don't appreciate what the Norwegian cuisine really is, because we tend to only take things from other places. Have you actually tried the Norwegian cuisine, sir?
Yes, but I would say that I agree. I mean, I think that the fact that you take few kinds of cuisine and you merge them together and you take the best of each is a wonderful thing. You know, we have in Israel, and I have in my own family, so many kinds of cuisine, you know, immigrants. Each one brings his own flavor and cuisine. I think it's wonderful. But yes, I like very much Norwegian cuisine. I will even tell you a secret that during, in the beginning of the year, in December, I even tried to cook your famous Norwegian dish. I'm sure I'm going to pronounce it wrongly, pinochet.
Yeah. Pinochet. Oh,
Pinochet, yeah.
Very good.
And I even managed, it was a bit salty, a bit too salty. I think I made a mistake there. But next December, I'm going to be much better. But yeah, I love very much, sometimes when I travel around, when I go to ski and when I go to other places, I don't come back to eat my own cooking at home, but I'm stopping in a small restaurant somewhere in nature and eat a real Norwegian warm and a warm feeling kind of food, heartwarming food, which I love very much.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you say this. And I've actually heard, you know, your staff are so forthcoming and good to me. And they told me that you're a good cook. And they even whispered to me that you one day brought homemade cheese.
Of course.
To your staff.
To be honest, I made cheese even yesterday. I make my own cheese and I make my own bread for many years already. Even though I'm trying the Norwegian as well, and I buy even Norwegian flour nowadays in order to try Norwegian breads. Yeah, I love it very much. Again, mixing some of the things I know from Israel of cooking and baking with what I learned here in Norway. I think it's wonderful.
So when the Corona crisis is over and travel is possible again, your loved one in Israel, she will look forward to getting some more tastes of your cuisine.
Yeah, unfortunately in WhatsApp it's impossible to pass taste and smells. But I hope that some innovation will come from Israel or from Norway that will enable us to do it. And for the time being, yes, I enjoy my own cuisine myself.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, so I take it that you actually have a fondness, I would even say a love for Norway.
Yeah, I think, as I said, almost 40 years ago, a bit less than 40 years ago, I visited Norway. I was impressed, as I said, by the people. So yeah, there is something that stays here in my heart even today. And now serving here as ambassador, of course, I see it from a different point of view. sometimes not an easy point of view, but I still like very much. I travel a lot all around Norway, officially and non-officially. I cycle a lot. I have a chance to meet people, to talk to people. Yesterday I cycled and I saw a few people and I spoke with them. It was just occasionally. They don't know I'm the Israeli ambassador, and still it was very nice. So yeah, I like very much the Norwegian people, the Norwegian spirit, your nature.
Thank you, sir. Now, you're also the ambassador for Iceland. How is that?
Well, you know, in Israel we are trying to limit as much as possible the budgets, the huge budgets that are related in opening embassies. So what we try to do is to have regional embassies, and this embassy is a kind of a mini regional one.
Yeah.
Instead of opening in Iceland an embassy, we keep the embassy here and we represent Israel there through mutual arrivals, both here to Iceland or Iceland to Jerusalem.
Exactly. Now, we have many viewers in Iceland, by the way, so we'll make sure they can see your interview. So that would be good for them. Also, I know that you are keenly interested in the Norwegian military and Norway as a war nation. Do you go to some of the warring events and commemorative events?
I would say that I see Norway as a peace nation in a way. I'm not contradicting you.
Yes, that's
but
good.
For me, coming from Israel and, you know, comparing the security challenges, the horrible security challenges that we have in Israel, and unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic concerning the future. When you see what's happening in the Middle East, Israel will have much more severe security challenges than most countries in the world. And for me, coming to Norway, I see a peaceful nation, of course, with challenges. I do not belittle it. I know exactly what are your perceptions here and what is the factual situation of Norway. But yes, I think that few countries in the world have very, very severe security challenges like the ones we have in Israel. So for me, Norway, in a way, is a peaceful nation.
Yes, yes.
And lucky you for that.
Yes, thank you. Now, Israel has huge security challenges, as you were saying. Do you ever get weary of having always to be alert so much as an Israeli?
That's a very interesting question, and thank you for it. I think that, in a way, yes, in some places you would find people that are feeling the burden of security very hard. And I'll give you an example. I'm not speaking on tanks or artillery or fighting. I'm speaking on Israelis in the south of Israel, for example, that are suffering for more than 10 years, rockets on their heads, non-ceasing alarms day and night, 10 seconds to run for a shelter. Kids that have to be still taught and get a chance to play and get a chance to become mature, educated, innovative adults as the other kids all around Israel. You find the psychological burden is huge and not easy to be forgotten. But when you look as a whole on the Israeli society, and I'm very proud of it, of course, not just as the Israeli ambassador, but as an Israeli citizen, as Alon. I'm very proud on the fact that in spite of this, the Israeli spirit is still a spirit of democracy, a spirit of a law-abiding nation, a spirit of a nation that is alerted by this security towards, for example, lots of innovation. Because if we are not going to innovate, if we are not going to create the Iron Dome in a matter of few months, when everyone in the world says, no, it's impossible to build a rocket that will intercept another rocket in the air.
Yeah.
And we show that it is possible because we need it. So I think that it's a double-edged issue. From the one hand, yes, there is a very strong psychological and security burden, money-wise, security-wise, etc. From the other hand, it keeps the Israeli society very alerted towards the need to keep ourselves as free press, free society, democratic society, and lots of innovation. And you find all these ingredients together in Israel.
Sir, you were stationed in, I believe, in Brussels for some years before you came to Scandinavia.
Yeah.
How many years was that?
Oh, I was 2 terms in Brussels, so altogether I think 7 years. Yeah.
How important is it for Israel to have the support of European nations?
I think it's very important. I think that it's important, I would say, from 3 different aspects. 2.5 maybe, I'll call it. One is the fact that Europe is very close to Israel, you know. Europe borders the Middle East, Europe is in the Mediterranean. Europe is the closest out of the big, you know, countries or let's call it a assembly of countries in the world. Europe is the closest. So anyway, Europe is interested in the Middle East, so connections with Europe are very important. More than that, I think that again, the idea of democracy, the idea of prevailing open debates, of prevailing open society, etc., which is embedded in Europe for so many years, at least after World War II, is very important for Israel. So connection with Europe in this regard is very important. And the third, of course, the economic aspect. Israel is very much embedded in the European affairs, even nowadays, in Corona times, when the whole world doesn't know where to go and economies are shattered, unfortunately, for the time being. The Israeli-European cooperation is going very well. Just last week, Europe announced more investments in Israeli high-tech industry. Europe, as the European Union. And cooperation is going forward very strongly, because I think that both sides understand that open debate and open deliberations from the one hand on a plethora of issues is important. On the same time, cooperation is no less important. It is going hand in hand. You cooperate more, you have the ability to discuss deeper and deeper the issues you want to discuss. And I'm very happy that Europe, for the time being, is continuing this way.
Wonderful. In a few days, on May 22nd, is what is called the Day of Jerusalem. And I'm not going to challenge you to talk about the complexities, but how important is Jerusalem for you? I know you're from Tel Aviv, but how important is Jerusalem for you, sir?
I'm in Tel Aviv, but for the last 35 years, when I'm in the ministry, almost 35 years, I work in Jerusalem. So I'm in a way Jerusalemite. But you know, it's very interesting. I'm reading now a fascinating book. I'm reading it for weeks and weeks because it really is a fascinating book of, 500 or 600 pages about Jerusalem. The whole history of Jerusalem from the beginning till the end, from different aspects. Unbelievable when you read it. But you know, I say that you don't have to read such books, even though I will recommend everyone to open such a book. But you just have to step into a Jerusalemite street in order to see the charm that this city has. This very tough, very problematic, very mixed city has a charm that you rarely find anywhere in the world. A charm that comes from history, a charm that comes from all 3 religions playing there, a charm that comes from the demography, both the demography of the Jewish part of the city, the religious, the non-religious, the ultra-religious, and then the Arabs and the Muslims, and of course all the Christian denominations all around, from all around the world, etc., that are represented there in neighborhoods and in their holy places, etc. I think it's a beautiful mix, a beautiful, I like this word, salad of many people with many perceptions, with many ideas, with many religions, that in the end live together. Harmony is a difficult word, it's a very heavy word, but is there harmony elsewhere? Do we have harmony elsewhere? And I believe that when you have this kind of mixing, this kind of amalgam, then you have very interesting and very innovative things coming out of it, not forgetting the problematics, and there are lots of problematics. So for me, Jerusalem, even though I never lived there as my hometown, I'm coming from the north of Israel, and Tel Aviv, is a charming city that everyone has to visit at least once in order to feel it. And after that, you know, there are many other places in Israel to visit, but Jerusalem is nice.
It's easy to sense your pride both of Israel and Jerusalem. But sir, I have a question. I have a mind that always wants to find out the funny things. Now, is there some rivalry between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem that is important for you? Is it good for Tel Aviv once in a while to beat Jerusalem in something?
Some rivalry. There is an open battle. No, I'm joking. But there is no doubt, as in many countries in the world, by the way.
Vatican and Oslo.
There are at least two poles. In Israel, you will find that there are many more than two poles. But yes, I think that two poles are very important. You know, competing is important. Two poles, each one taking its up in another dimension. Yes, of course, Tel Aviv is the more, I would say, international city with lots of openness, lots of culture, lots of lightheadedness, and on the same time, innovation and high-tech and wonderful education system and everything, and the beach and everything is Tel Aviv. And of course, Jerusalem, the heavier, deeper, historical kind of thing. For me, it's beautiful. I think that, you know, in a huge country like Norway, in which you said Bergen, but Bergen is so far away.
Yeah.
Tel Aviv and Jerusalem are 60 kilometers apart.
Yeah, exactly.
How much is it? Less than 1 hour in a car,
Yeah.
in a good day, when you don't have too many cars on the way. So I feel that, again, this is a kind of an ongoing upper spiral. When you have a city like that, a city like this, and kind of competing, if at all, is very important, like you have in Norway, and I saw in Norway as well. Bergen, and not just Bergen, the north and the south and the east and the west. It's important to have this.
Well, thank you so much, sir, Your Excellency, Ambassador Alon Roth, for receiving us. And if I may, respectfully, I just want to say God bless you.